Test it.
Can you give me a second?
There it is. Okay, that seems to be working. And all the students are here. The whole class of 3 today.
Sorry about that. There is a Dhamma talk I had to give around 2:45 to the temple, Toronto Buddhist Vihara.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, check. Okay, so yeah, we're going to give you 5 precepts. Please recite Namo Tassa 3 times to observe 5 precepts.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Yampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Panati pata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panati pata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Kamisu miccāchāra veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumchachara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Suramiraya majjapama dattana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameri majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Sadhu, sadhu. Okay, now we're going to offer all the offerings we place in front of the Buddha statue in our places. So let's recite together to offer all these offerings by contemplating the great qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Veneration to the Buddha. Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho. Vinja charana sampanno sugato lokavidu. Anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati. Sattha deva manussanang buddho bhagavati. Veneration to the Dhamma. Swakhato bhagavata dhammo sandittiko akaliko ehi passiko openaiko pacchatang viditambu vinyuhiti. Veneration to the Sangha. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Samichi patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Yadidang chattari purisa yugani atta purisa pungala. Esa bhagavato savaka sangho. Ahuneyu Pahuneyu Dakhineyu Anjali Karaniyu Anuttarang Punyaketang Lokasati. Offering candles. Ghanasarappadittina Deepena Tamadansina Tiloka Deepang Sangbundhang Pujayami Tamodam. Offering incense. Gandha Sambhara Yuttina Dhupenahang Sugandhina Pujaye Pujaniyantang Puja Bhajana Muttamang. Offering flowers. Vanne gandhe gunopetam etang kusuma santating pujayami munindasya siripada saruruhe pujemi buddhang kusumena nena punyena mitena cha hotu mokhang puphang milayati yatha idam me kayo tathayati vinasa bhavang. Offering medicinal drinks including water. Adivase tunu bante paniyang parikapitang anukhangpang upadaye patiganhatu muttamang. Adivase tunu bhante gilana pachayang nimang anukhangpang upadaye patiganhatu muttamang. Adivase tunu bhante besanjang parikapitang anukhangpang upadaye patiganhatu muttamang. Veneration of all the pagodas of Buddhist relics and the Bodhi tree. Vandami chetiyang sambang sabbethani supatittitang saririka dhatu mahabodhim buddhirupang sakalang sada. Yasya mule nisinnove sabbari vijayang aka patto sabbanyutang santha vandetang bodhipadapang. Apologizing from the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami bhante bhuri panya tathagata. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami dhamma sanditthika akalika. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami sangha supatipanna anuttara. Aspiration. Imina punya kammena mami bala samagamu satan samagamu hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, let's get ready for the meditation. So please keep your postures very well up. Sit upright. Put your right palm on the left palm and close your eyes, please. We're going to practice the first Brahma Vihara. There are 4 Brahma Viharas. Do like a Brahma. Loving kindness. Some people call it friendliness. Starting from ourselves and then gradually radiating loving kindness to others. Finally, all living beings. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to me. May no difficulties come to me. May no problems come to me. May I always meet with success. May I also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May my parents, family members, teachers, relatives, friends, and all living beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to them. May no difficulties come to them. May no problems come to them. May they always meet with success. May they also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's share all the good karmas with the departed relatives and the Devas and Dhammas. Idam me nyati nang hotu sukita huntu nyatayo. Idam me nyati nang hotu sukita huntu nyatayo. Idam me nyati nang hotu sukita huntu nyatayo. Ittavata chammihi sambetang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya akasattha ca bummattha deva naga mahidnika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkhantu lokasasanang chirang rakkhantu desanang chirang rakkhantu mang paranti. Okay, now it's time for you to worship the monk. So, Ovini.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Silavantam, Gunavantam, Punyakirtam, Anuttaran, Dulavena, Mayalatam, Buddha Puttan, Namamaham. Silavantam, Gunavantam, Punyakirtam, Anuttaran, Dulavena, Mayalatam, Buddha Puttan, Namamaham. Silavantam, Gunavantam, Punyakirtam, Anuttaran, Dulavena, Mayalatam, Buddha Puttan, Namamaham.
Now let's venerate our parents. So please approach your parents now. Mother, dasamase ure katva posesi buddhi karanang ayudighang vassa satang matu padang namamahang dasamasayak duk binda mahedu amme lekiri karapwa madedi kala amme නිවසේ බුදුන් යැයි බුදු හිමි දෙසු අම්මේ ඔබ පායුක වඳිමි මා ආදර අම්මේ. Father, බුද්ධිකාරෝ අලිංගිත්වා චුම්බිත්වා පිය පුත්තකං රාජමජ්ජං සුපතින්ඨං පීතුපාදං නමාමහං නැති බැරි කමක් මට නොදැනෙන න්‍යායෙනි දුක් කරදර මැදින් මා හැදු දයාවෙනි හොඳ දරුවෙකු වෙන්න මට දුන් ඔවාමිනි ඔබ පායුග වඳිමි මා ආදර පියාණෙනි. Let's get back to your seats. Now we are going to bless you. Please receive the blessings. Abhivadana silissa nichang vaddhapachayino chattaro dhamma vaddhanti ayuvanno sukham balang ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevacha ato nibbana sampatti iminati saminchatu. Okay, now we're going to sing the Dhamma school song. Mike Ovini sent me her voice for Dhamma school song and Chattamana Kagata. So we're not going to listen to a YouTube video today. We're gonna listen to Dhamma school song Chattamana Kagata in her voice. We'll see how that
Fantastic.
goes.
I'm excited to hear it.
Yes, we'll see that.
Sambudu himige sadham sisilen sanahin ap siri lakku darubo daham pasale sevanehi vadimin udare gunadam siddha darubo daham pasale sevanehi vadimin udar gunadam siddha darubo Hastu bau das aku sar durna isi ko man hem bind harna mit karuna mudita de muni gun sapura pilivet mag saresa sapura pilivet mag saresa Sambudu himige sadham sisilen sanahin ap siri lakku darubo daham pasale sevanehi vadimin udar gunadam siddha darubo daham pasale sevanehi vadimin udar gunadam siddha darubo
Yeah, thank you, Avani. And who added the MIDI file? You know the MIDI file? The how do you call that MIDI file? The MIDI file, that music, what do you call?
Oh, I just found it on YouTube. I just
Oh, great.
the Hampasa Gita karaoke.
Great. Mike, what do you think about it?
Good, fantastic. I like it a lot. It's
Rather
it's
listening
our
to
own
somebody else way of singing this song, huh? Because I normally
Yeah.
go to YouTube and look it up on Google and YouTube. But yeah, so hopefully I'm gonna add this to YouTube, and then we're gonna have your voice every Dhamma school day.
That's great. It'll be part of the legacy now. I like that.
Part of the legacy, and
Yeah.
Chattamana Kagata too. I hope other students will also be encouraged. You know. Yeah. Okay, Mike. So over to you.
Okay, so today, let me put a link to the textbook here in the chat, just in case you lost it. Today we're talking about more about Devas. And today we're going to we've already discussed this a little bit in Pali, because we do it every day. We're talking about Bhumma Devas. And in the opening prayers that we do at the very end, we talk about Akasa Tachapamata Deva Nagam Hidika. So it's just like all the devas and nagas and so on of the sky, Akasa, and the Bhumma, which is the soil of the earth, And we're talking about the latter, the Devas of the earth. And so this is an interesting topic because we usually think of Devas as being living in heavens or being like gods and things like that. So Deva is usually translated as God. But today, as we're going to see, this is a good example of a time when you might not want to translate it as a god because it maybe makes you think of something up high in the heavens or something incredibly powerful. These are more like sprites or spirits or fairies or something like that, So the word directly translating Deva as God might give us sort of a strange impression. So on page 411 of the textbook, we have a little introduction to the Devas of the earth and sky. Naomi, why don't you read that paragraph for us?
The lowest class of Devas are those who do not dwell in any of the sagas, but are bound to the same terrestrial space as the humans and animals. There are many different levels of happiness and power among the earthbound Devas. Some are poor things, not nearly as wretched as the Petas perhaps, but approaching that state. Others are beings of great might and power, like the higher Devas of the sagas. They are normally invisible to humans or appear only as a brilliant light. They may interact with humans from time to time, usually benevolently, but are more often content to simply enjoy their own existence. They prefer wild places, especially forests, to areas of humans, although there are also Devas who dwell in towns. Nagara Devata,
Nagara Devata.
the widespread Nagara Devata, the widespread and range of habitations of these Devas approach an animalistic or pantheistic view of the natural world and is an important component in the traditional Buddhist reverence for nature.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, these are topics that we perhaps don't discuss as much as we used to, I think. In Buddhist cultures, people have spent probably more time historically in thinking about and dealing with questions about these kinds of devas than modern people do. Modern Buddhists probably don't spend as much time thinking about them. But yeah, we have a couple of interesting terms here. The Nagara Devata, although these are maybe less common, a Nagara is a town or a city. So they're city gods or city spirits. And they can, they are qualified as these kind of beings. They're often like protectors or patrons of a town or city. So, they might intervene to protect the inhabitants of that place. The animistic and pantheistic elements of this are very interesting. Animism is essentially very common in primitive human societies. It's this worship or reverence for animals, and pantheistic. Theos is God in Greek. Pan means all, everything. So pantheistic is like everything's a god or everything is God. So it's in this sense, it's sort of true that like everything has a little god in it. Everything could have a god in it. Everything could have a deva in it. So everything is treated with respect. And so we'll see specific stories of places that might have gods in them, and how traditionally in Buddhist societies these places were respected and revered. Let's see. Ovindu, please read the story on the next page, starting with the Devas of the forest.
Sure. The Devas of the forest and of the earth generally are collective known as Bhuma Devas. The word Bhuma referring to earth or soil. This is considered the lowest form of a Deva, and a person who makes merit but may have some deficiencies in his virtue is reborn there. A young man lived a life of heedless pleasure, and having wasted his inheritance, he took to armed robbery. Captured by the king's men, he was led to his execution when a young woman took pity on him and gave him some sweetmeats. The venerable Moggallana was nearby, and he knew this man would be reborn in Niraya if he did not make some merit quickly. So the elder appeared before the man, who stood with the sweets in hand. he offered the venerable elder bhikkhu. By this act, he would have reappeared in the Deva world, except that as his head was being chopped off, he had a mind of lust towards the young woman. As a result, he took birth in an inferior kind of Deva, tree spirit whose abode was a large banyan tree in the jungle.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, this is a case where we see multiple conflicting factors in this character's rebirth, this person's rebirth. We see the main tendencies he had cultivated throughout his life, which were these essentially negative tendencies, just pleasure seeking with no long-term thought of the long term, and that came back to bite him immediately in this life. And then his destination was, his changed by his act of generosity at the very end, and then of course that itself was also reversed by his final thoughts of lust. The final thought, remember, is very important in determining your destination. So in this case, it's a sort of a demotion, being a Bhumadeva for this person. There are many kinds. I'm just reading the next paragraph. There are many kinds of Bhumadevas living in many kinds of abode. There are sea devas, or Samudra Devata. Samudra is the sea. River devas, forest devas, park devas, plant, bush, or foliage devas, grass devas, as well as town or city devas, and household devas, anto devata. So anto devatas are also very interesting. You would have, this can mean deities that literally live in your house, or ones that protect your family or your household, or somehow bound to your household. They're often associated with ancestors. If you're, like most primitive societies or animistic societies engage in ancestor worship, this is the Buddhist expression of this. Is usually the ancestors of the family retain some interest in that family if they have been reborn in the Deva realm, and so they are likely to intervene on the behalf of that family or try and help them and protect them. Okay, let's see here. Symbiotic relationship. Okay, let's go to on page 413. Ovini, why don't you read the most common kind of Bhumadeva? Why don't you read that paragraph and the read that first paragraph and the quote, not the whole story following, just that first quote.
Sure. Okay. The most common kind of Bhumadeva, to judge their frequent appearance in the stories, is a Rukkadeva or tree spirit. They are often called according to the type of tree which is their abode, as for example a Bodhi tree Deva or a Nim tree Deva. They are generally imagined as living in a small invisible abode among the foliage, but at times it seems almost as if they are identified with the tree itself. The certain bhikkhu was cutting branches from the living tree in order to construct a dwelling. In doing so, he cut off the arm of the Rukkadeva's son. The Rukkadeva was enraged and considered killing the bhikkhu, but instead reported the incident to the Buddha, who laid down the rule against cutting living plants.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so we see here this story comes from the Vinaya, or the monks' rules. So we see here why monks are not supposed to engage in that kind of activity. So you're not likely to see a monk, say, mowing the lawn, because there are devas who live in grass. And that's we've just seen that as an example of the Bhumadeva abodes. Is not that the grass, it's sometimes hard to say in the literature, but it seems to be, as you see in the footnote, the Dhammapada separates this, like the Deva and their abode, pretty clearly. So it's not really the case that Buddhists aren't supposed to harm plants, because plants aren't considered sentient beings. It's not the plant itself. It's the possibility that there might be some hidden Deva or something living in it, and we don't want to hurt that being. So the tree or the plant itself is not really the problem, but it can have collateral effects. It can cause collateral damage. There is a story. Do we want to read the story? I think This one's pretty long. I think we might skip this story. There is a long story here about how a king wanted to build a palace, and so he wanted to cut down a tree to make a pillar, and the deva from the tree said, "Please don't. I live in this tree." Essentially. Let's see here. Let's go to page 416. Yeah, let's go to page 416. Naomi, why don't you read, there exists a kind of class system, all the way to the end of the quote.
Okay. There exists a kind of class system among the Bhumadevas, with the most exalted living in great trees, the most humble in lesser vegetation. The following excerpt is from Jataka the Buddha told as a teaching against class prejudice. A powerful Deva king was reborn as a Rukadeva, dwelling in a huge, straight, beautiful blessing tree in the king's garden. In the same garden dwelt a humble Deva in a clump of kusa grass. One day, the king ordered the big tree cut down to make a new pillar for his palace. The royal carpenters made a sacrifice to the tree and announced that they would be felling it the next day. The Rukadeva was distraught and fearful for the loss of his home, not knowing where he would flee with his children. None of his friends among the other Devas were able to help, except for the Kusa grass Deva, who hit upon a ruse. He took on the form of a chameleon and caused the appearance of holes in the trunk of the blessing tree. When the carpenters came with their saws and axes the next day, they saw a trunk full of holes with a little lizard peeking out of one. Deciding it was too rotten to use as a pillar, they moved on. The blessing tree Deva remarked how of all these powerful Devas, only the humble Kusa grass Deva had the wit to save his home. Truly, a good friend should not be chosen by his rank.
Yeah, so this is an interesting story because it sort of presupposes that the audience understands that there's a hierarchy between the Bhumadevas, and that like living in a clump of grass is less important than living in a big, strong tree. But I guess it was understood that was by the audience at the time. And this is supposed to also be this is another core Buddhist tenet, which is that, essentially we are all equal in the sense that we suffer equally, and we in the long term, and we all have equal potential for awakening. So this incorporates multiple elements of Buddhist philosophy: respect for nature, and also egalitarianism. So it's a very good illustrative story. And I think this is also, these kind of values are very important to pay attention to now, because I think this is, as everyone is well aware, destruction of the natural environment is a threat to our own continued existence. And so this is a good way to think about, even if you don't take these kinds of stories literally. I think they're incredibly important right now, because even if there aren't devas living in the trees, the continued existence of the tree protects us, even if it's not imbued with like spiritual power, or if it doesn't have an organism, an entity living in it. It doesn't matter. It's still important for our continued survival. So even if it's just an allegory, it's a very good and useful one. But yeah, from this last point, that a friend shouldn't be chosen based on their rank, this implies that the opposite was sadly often the case. We can also learn from the story that even the humblest of devas have magical powers of transformation, and they can make themselves visible to humans in some form if they so choose. Further, we learn from these stories of the family relations among devas, who are very fond of their children. Bhumadevas generally are born by spontaneous arising, like the higher devas. That means that they just pop into existence, just go, and then they're there. They don't have they don't go into labor and give birth or lay eggs or anything like that, unlike animals or humans. But later sources say that some of them give birth via the womb, like the Visuddhimagga says that. At times, there may be sexual attraction between devas and humans, as in the Samidhi Jataka, where a female deva sees a hermit bathing and declares her love for him, attempting without success to seduce him away from his asceticism. So that's that's an interesting danger, I think, for hermits living in the wilderness, is that Bhumadevas might come and try and seduce you. Although I have spent time living in the wilderness, abiding by the 8 precepts, and that never happened to me, and I never heard of it happening to anybody. But according to these stories, it could. Let's see. I don't know if we're going to worry about that too much. I want to actually, maybe if I have a chance, share. Let's read page 4, I think page 423. And then I'm going to go off script a little bit. Is it 423? I think so. Yes. Yeah. On page 423, we talk about, it talks about the city dwelling devas, or devatas who live in towns. There's an interesting story there. Let's see. Are we back? Oh, Vindu. Yeah. But Vindu, why don't you read the introductory paragraph and the story that follows?
Which page is it?
On page 423, it starts with some Bhumadevas live in towns and cities.
Okay. Some Bhumadevas live in towns and cities. These are given the appellation Nagara Devata. It seems that their favorite dwelling place is over a gateway, such as were found in the walled compounds, which were the homes of the wealthy in ancient India. Anathapindika was a very wealthy merchant and a devout follower of the Buddha. His home had 7 gateways, and over the 4th gateway there dwelt a Devi who had the wrong views. Whenever the Buddha or one of his disciples came to see Anathapindika, she was compelled to leave her place and flee to the 1st floor. This annoyed her, so she appeared to Anathapindika, hovering in the air, and attempted to persuade him to stop making meal offerings to the Buddha and the Sangha. Anathapindika responded by expelling her from his home. She left weeping with her children in tow and appealed to the chief deva of the city. He had no sympathy, calling her wicked. She then went to the 4 great kings with the same result. Finally, she went to Sakka, the great king of the devas in Tahatimsa, who told her that Anathapindika had exhausted his wealth and advised her that she could make amends by finding him more. She did this in 3 ways: by using her deva powers to recover some treasure he had lost at sea, finding him new wealth in the form of buried treasure, and going with some fierce young yakas to dun his negligent debtors. Afterward, she appeared before Anathapindika and begged his forgiveness, which he gave her after taking her to the Buddha to take the triple gem as refuge.
Okay, great. So yeah, there's an interesting, the devas do not always, although traditionally Buddhism encourages us to respect the devas and get along well with them, they do not always get along well with Buddhism. It's just because they have heightened powers and senses does not mean that they philosophically will agree with any particular position. They're individuals, just like we are. So it's an important thing to remember, and that they can be helpful. As in the case here, we see she's helping Anathapindika. So this is an important thing to bear in mind. Cultivating good relationships with them can, traditionally it's viewed as a means to wealth and success. People would pray to devas and spirits to protect their towns and their homes or their fields and things like that. This is common in all Buddhist cultures. I think it doesn't matter what tradition is followed, and you will still see these kinds of practices more if you go to like Asia. It's not as common here in the West, probably because we're more urbanized. We live in cities and things. We don't think about this stuff as much, but also because I think Buddhism in the West has adapted to Western culture, which is less, I guess, less concerned with the supernatural. So we don't think so much about these devas. But respecting the natural environment is a good thing to do, regardless of whether you believe there are literally devas in it or not. Here we have a fascinating glimpse into the internal government of the devas. Yeah, right. She went and appealed to Sakka. She went up and found a higher authority. An example about their powers and their vulnerability. The episode near the end in which the yuccas acting as bill collectors may be a funny image, but nevertheless somehow appropriate. It would probably at least be effective. Okay, good. Now I wanted to also, there is a famous story as well from the Thai forest tradition about a Bhumadeva. But I'm trying to find the original text of it. So there's a modern story. I'm not saying this is necessarily true, but it's famous. And so I thought it might be worth reading. I have it, the book that it's supposed to be in here, but I don't know if I can find it. I should have bookmarked it. I lost it. But yeah, anyway, this I'll just summarize it. Yeah, there's essentially a story of Ajahn Mun, who's a Thai forest master who was traveling to, he at one point traveled to Myanmar, which borders Thailand. He's Thai, and he went over the border, walking through the jungles to Myanmar to get some meditation instruction, because the Burmese are generally regarded as being very diligent meditators. And at that time, there was not a very living meditation tradition in Thailand. So he went there, and when he came back on the way, he got stuck in the jungle, and there's no one to feed him. Even though there's fruit and things on the trees, monks aren't supposed to feed themselves. The rules require that they be fed, that they live only on charity. So they're not supposed to like take food from the trees, for example, because it's not given to them. It's taken. So taking this rule very seriously, he did not forage. He just walked and walked, and then he ran out of energy and ran out of steam. And he just basically sat down under a tree, and he was like, I'm out of juice. I'm just gonna die here, alone in the jungle. There was no one there to help him. And according to a story, it's a folk tale, somebody came from around the tree, and he was dressed like a 19th century Burmese aristocracy, which is kind of weird. So it's like somebody who should have been gone 100 or 200 years before. And he had a big plate of food, and he didn't say anything. He just gave Ajahn Mun the food, and Ajahn Mun ate it. And when he was done, the guy just took the plate and walked around the back of the tree and disappeared. And so Ajahn Mun's followers have taken this to be a story about a Bhumadeva offering him a meal, which it may have been. It might be completely made up, but it is a story that kind of shows how these beings, these devas, the Bhumadevas, still kind of permeate the consciousness, especially in Southeast Asia. There's a widespread belief that they exist and that they can intervene on your behalf. And that's probably the most famous story that I know of a modern story of a Bhumadeva interacting with a person, with a human. Okay. Great. Oh, do we have time? We could probably talk even about we're supposed to do that next time. Hang on. Yeah, okay. Why don't we talk a little bit then, since we're well ahead of schedule, about the Valahaka Devas as well, the cloud or the sky Devas, because I wasn't originally going to have time to squeeze them into the schedule. So, where were we? Vinny, why don't you read on page 424, the first paragraph about the Valahaka Devas.
Sure. The Valahaka Devas, cloud devas, dwell in clouds and have some control over the weather. They are divided into cold cloud devas, warm cloud devas, storm cloud devas, wind cloud devas, and rain devas. Creating weather is for these devas an act of play. When a storm deva, for instance, causes a storm, it is due to his reveling in his own kind of delight. During the hot season, they do not like to stir their vimanas to being too hot to play. Hence, it does not rain, even a single drop. These devas, however, are not the sole cause of the weather. The commentary lists 7 of the powers of Nagas, the powers of Supanas, the power of Devas, the power of asseriation of truth, natural weather, the workers of matra and supernormal power. The sub-commentary explains that normal seasons change and are simply the work of natural process, but unusual weather is caused by action of these devas.
Okay, great. So we see that the Buddhist understanding, the traditional ancient Buddhist understanding of, say, like weather and the actions of the sky was actually pretty complicated, because they understood that that like rain and wind and storms were a natural thing to a certain extent, but they also believed that sometimes and in some ways or some circumstances, they were the works of devas or all other kinds of things, nagas, the power of an assertion of truth. What does that mean? Does anybody have an idea? What's the power of an assertion of truth? What does it mean to assert something? To assert is to like put a statement out there, like to claim it or say that it is true, so to basically proclaim something, like 2 + 2 = 4. That's an assertion of the truth. I'm saying that is true. In this case, it's usually more often like spiritual truth. Like you could proclaim, you could assert something like, all compounded phenomena are marked with suffering. And if you say that, that's an assertion of the truth from a Buddhist perspective. And so these statements, if they're spoken in the right time with the right conviction by the right person, have a great deal of power. And it's believed that sometimes this could even change the weather. It could be pouring rain, and then you make a very strong statement of assertion of truth, and then that will change the weather. It's usually as a side effect, a consequence of the statement. It's not usually, the statement isn't made to change the weather. It's just like a dramatic consequence of it. And we see this also in similar things happening in early texts, like we see in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is the first sutta. The earth quakes when the Buddha delivers this very short teaching, like the whole earth shakes because of that. So we see similar things happening a lot of the time when people speak the truth.
I also remember another Jataka story where I think it was one of the Buddha's past lives where he was born as a bird, and then there was like a really big fire, and then the Buddha or the Bodhisattva said something like, if I am to become a Buddha in the future, I will not get burned to the fire. And then he didn't get burned to the fire.
That's right. What's that, Ovini?
Oh no, I'm pretty sure it's like Vatakurula Jatike, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's also this kind of, I'm not sure, I guess an assertion of truth statement. So it's perhaps a uniquely Buddhist thing. I've never heard of it in any other tradition. It's like, if I have blah blah blah, if I have so much merit, if this is true, then may this consequence happen. We see it in the Angulimala blessing for pregnant women, which you're probably aware of, when it was a gatha that the Buddha gave to Angulimala when Angulimala asked, hey, when there's a pregnant woman who wants my blessing, what should I say to her? And the Buddha said, you can say something like this, if I have done no harm to beings for my whole life, then may this unborn child be healthy and happy, and so on. And Angulimala asked it to be revised because he had killed many people. But he's like, okay, well, since I have taken the holy life on myself, since that's time, if I have been good, then may this outcome happen. I've also heard one famous one, Ajahn Lee was attacked by a swarm of ants while he was sitting under a tree. Like a bunch of fire ants crawled all over his body. And he made a statement like this to the ants. And he said, if I have abided by the precepts since I've taken the robes or something like that, may we not harm each other. And then the ants, they crawled all over him, but they didn't bite once, and they just let him be. So there's lots of stories like that. And yeah, it seems like it's a uniquely Buddhist sort of structure to it's not really a prayer. It's like it's like playing chicken with the universe, I guess. You're like, yeah, I see what you're doing, but I'm confident that my virtue will protect me. And then you just lean into it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. That's probably good enough. We'll just read this last little paragraph. Where were we? Who read the last one? Was it Govindu? Ovini. Okay. I'll read the last paragraph then. On the morality of human beings. It is also said that the morality of human beings has an indirect effect on the weather by causing the sky devas to become either pleased or annoyed. When the state of human morality is good, the devas are pleased and the rain falls regularly in due season. When human morality is bad, the devas are displeased and withhold the rains. So this is directly from the original strata of the Pali Canon. So that's a really ancient Buddhist belief. However, it may also happen that the cloud devas are simply distracted and play and become heedless, because they are, after all, beings of the plane of sense desire. And this is said to be among the causes of failure of the rains, which the prognosticators, or that is like ancient weathermen, people who try to guess in advance what the weather will be. The ancient weathermen do not know this, and they cannot see it. And it may explain why weather forecasts are so often wrong. It's could be that. This is a common belief in all cultures and civilizations around the world, that essentially what the weather is doing is dependent on how well behaved you are here and now. We see it in Christianity and Judaism and Islam. We see it in Chinese religions like Taoism and Confucianism. We see it in Hinduism. We see it everywhere. Everywhere there are humans, we see this belief that being good makes the rain come at the right time and the right amount. I wouldn't count on it. don't count on that. But that said, it is raining right now, so I don't know. Maybe we've been good, or maybe we've been bad. I don't know. Try not to read too much into it. But it does seem like a nice existence, being a sky deva. But it is also considered to be a temporary and ultimately unsatisfying existence. Okay, so with that done, I think we can take a little break and come back at 3. We'll come back at 3:05 or something. And after that, we'll do a short meditation. I have a Kahoot for you this time. There were enough kind of quizable factoids in there that I put one together. And then we'll have a little chat. Okay, so see you guys back here in about 10 minutes.
Mike, we're back.
Great. Okay. Let's do a short meditation. Yeah, let's go for about 10 minutes. You can meditate on whatever you like. And when you're done, or at the beginning, actually, maybe it's better to think about dedicating whatever your practice is to whatever goal you have. Maybe it's just to overcome some vice, or just to make it through the day, or achieve the final nibbana, whatever you need. Practice with that intention. Okay. Let me get out a Kahoot for you guys. There we go. Can I make it muted? There we go. Okay. Get the game pin. Come on. Come here. That's the game pin. Let me try and share my screen with you too. Well, since I did this. Okay. That looks like it's working. Now I just have to make sure that, there we are. Okay. I'm streaming it over like multiple things. So I'm seeing it on multiple screens. I don't know which is the real button. There we go. So we talked about a bunch of different abodes for the Bhuma Devas. Which one wasn't listed? Okay, yeah, wow. Very good, quick. Stones. Now, it wasn't listed, but lots of people and cultures have believed that there are devas in stones. So we'll try and keep an open mind. But that's what it wasn't in the book. Okay. Which is the most common abode for them? They like to live. They like to live in trees. They like to live in trees. But all of the other ones are listed as common abodes for the Bhuma Devas as well. So they could be in bushes or even towns. Okay, there was the story about the blessing tree. Where was the Deva who saved the blessing tree from the loggers? Yeah, he lived in a clump of grass. Not a pond or a stream, nor a hole in the earth. I don't think we heard of any living in holes in the earth. Although, why not? They are great figures in fairy tales. These or fairy tale like stories, because they're magical enough to be unique, but close enough to humanity to interact with us. So Anathapindika's household deva, that's right, she did not change soil into gold, but she did save one of his shipwrecks, and she found buried treasure for him, and she hired debt collectors. Now, bonus question, does anybody remember what the debt collectors were?
I think they're Yaku.
They're yuccas, that's right. So they were some kind of scary looking monster. I would probably pay up if one of those came for me. Okay. It was just a quick one to go over the different things we talked about today. The Bhuma Devas, like I said, good fairy tale stories. They remind me a lot of some of the kami you'll find in like Japanese mythology, and they probably are the same because Japanese mythology is often based on Buddhist philosophy and cosmology. Oh, why am I? Let's stop share. There we go. Okay, so yeah, you'll see those kinds of nymphs or sprites or woodland spirits show up in all kinds of stories in East Asian culture, and sometimes it's influenced by Buddhism, and sometimes Buddhism just adopted it or subsumed it. Okay, so we can have a chat. We got maybe 20 or 30 minutes. We can talk about whatever you want. We can talk about Bhuma Devas, fairy tale creatures. We could talk about your meditation practice, about your life, how it's going, or any kind of Buddhism adjacent topics.
Mike, I have a quick question.
Sure.
In one of the pages, it said some of devas are like some of the lower end devas. They had lives that are like some of them are very wretched and close to pretas. So how could deva live a life that's bad, I guess?
Yeah, they're not that bad. I mean, I think it says explicitly that they're some of them live lives that are not fantastic, but not quite as bad as yakas. I think the wording was something to that effect. And I think the way to think of it might be like the grass, the kusa grass deva, right? That's a good example of these kind of lower Bhuma devas. I mean, it would be kind of unfortunate to be stuck living in a clod of grass or something, and that's your house. But they're kind of, I guess a better way to think of it is like being very poor. Like their experience is not painful, like some of the yakas or the petas. Like their existence doesn't seem from the literature to be characterized by discomfort, but they don't necessarily have great power or great pleasure either. I guess the pleasure that the Pumadevas get, definitely for sure, is like the pleasure of being in nature, which is, I guess, something that we understand as humans as well. We like to walk in the woods, to be on beaches or in the sea or lakes. Like we as humans enjoy these. That kind of pleasure is the pleasure that Pumadevas would experience by default. So there is a certain amount of kind of abstract pleasure in that, and they will have that, but they don't necessarily have, like some of the higher devas have like palaces and mansions, and they have perfumes and nice clothes and all these things. The Bhuma devas don't have that. They are just, their living conditions are similar to animals, but their kind of physical experience is more pleasant and blissful. So it's like if you were a human being who was just like magically inclined toward camping is might be a good way of thinking of it. So yeah, it's but some of the lower ones definitely they don't have much, not more than just a clod of grass that they hide in or something. And yeah, there's a
Thanks.
yeah, but it definitely is an interesting uh uh question. And I think we have seen a fair few kinds of beings that aren't neatly fit into the scheme. You know, traditionally we see it's like here's a pyramid, and you know, at the top there's the Brahmas and then regular devas, and but some of the beings kind of float around in there, and they don't fit neatly into the categories like asuras or like these guys here, like the Bhuma devas. But the pleasures they enjoy, yeah. So here we go. Here's a quote from the textbook. The pleasures they enjoy are dependent on material basis, and they can suffer when the trees that they live in are felled. But they're not, but they don't have these, and they don't have these great powers, but they don't suffer. It's not like necessarily painful experience, and I think that's probably the main key differentiating factor is like if your experience is dominated by pain.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here we go. Actually, this is a good. I believe we also talked about earlier in the next paragraph after the one I think you mentioned about them being similar to yakas or being confused with yakas. Remember, I mentioned that typically you have humans when they achieve full awakening, they essentially are already monks or nuns, or they must become monks or nuns or die soon, right? According to the Theravadan perspective. And the devas, when they if they manage on the rare occasion they achieve full awakening, they just disappear. But Bhuma devas are not like that. Bhuma devas can actually live the rest of their lifespan as a Bhuma deva and be an arhat. So there are theoretically fully awakened Bhuma devas hiding around somewhere, and that is similar to like the Mahayana or Tibetan concept of there being uh, devas who are Buddhas or who are arhats, and they are awakened beings, and you can supplicate them and get teaching and advice from them because they're still alive now and they have the additional advantage of being powerful like devas. So there are some, so Bhuma devas are kind of like in the middle of this, right in that sweet spot. So theoretically, there would be Bhuma devas around that you could talk to and ask for advice because they would be fully awakened, but there probably aren't many.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about these devas or about your life in general right now? Meditation practice. How's that going for all of you? Are you I know Vindu and Ovini, you guys practice regularly, you've told me, right? I don't know about you, Naomi. Do you have a daily practice meditation?
Do not do it daily, but I do it like a couple times a week.
Okay, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think that's higher batting average than most. I'm constantly trying to encourage people to at least have a daily meditation practice. That's like, I feel like that's a good thing that we can establish as lay people. We can at least aspire to that. I've been practicing meditation ever since I was a kid, like 6 or 7. So it never struck me as being a big deal. But then, I've met more and more people in my life, and I realized, yeah, it's actually pretty hard. It is actually very hard to set even a few minutes aside to do it regularly. So I understand the struggle. And I don't even get it every day. Sometimes I miss it. I'm guilty. I find it also beneficial to choose a theme of meditation or to experiment with one that's portable, that you can carry around with you so that you can continue to practice even if you don't want to sit. Those are good.
I have a question.
Hmm.
If devas are real, then why don't they show themselves?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. The answer is usually because they do, and we traditionally given as they do, and we just don't perceive, we don't understand what we're seeing. So that's sometimes given an explanation, but the usual, most obvious, easy one is they think we're nasty. Like they think we're gross and filthy and disgusting, and they don't want anything to do with us. So that's usually the reason. It's actually in the textbook on page where was it? It was in this chapter today. I think we just skipped over it. There was a mention of this. The Bhuma devas also, I think, are disgusted by us. So they generally don't. Where was it? I can't find it. But anyway, it's somewhere in that chapter. There's a mention of this exact point, that they think we're disgusting and we smell, and it's just an unpleasant experience dealing with us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here we go. Page 417. The relations between Bhuma devas and humans are complex. Sometimes we worship them. And this was common in ancient India, and also there's a contemporary Thai custom of doing exactly the same thing. They put little altars around. In Japan, I've seen the same. Although they're generally benevolent, it seems our coarse physical form, and particularly our odor, is offensive to them. Yeah.
Never mind,
yeah.
sorry.
Anyway, yeah, so they think we're gross. They think we smell, and I could completely understand it. We're full of all kinds of gross liquids and nasty things like that. So that's one commonly cited explanation. But if you are particularly virtuous, it's sort of, you can cleanse that nastiness away. So the explanation for devas sometimes visiting more saintly or holy people is that those people either have washed away this stink, or they are just so virtuous that the devas are impressed enough anyway that they'll put up with it to talk with them. But yeah, I guess it's similar to like the reason why we as humans understand that cockroaches exist and are sentient beings, but we don't like to spend time with them. And we don't view them as being particularly useful to us, like we just don't deal with them unless it's to kill them. But yeah, so devas are not quite that malicious. They just don't, yeah, they just like to avoid us. That's the traditional explanation. Another potential explanation is that they do not literally exist. That is an understanding that many modern kind of like Buddhist modernists have taken. Devas like Devas or up in the higher realms, they don't literally exist, and it's just a metaphor. I've known a few people who take that stance as well. I think both of those views can be integrated, like a heavenly state of mind being an experience of a heavenly realm is completely consistent with a Buddhist philosophy and worldview that also incorporates literal other realms. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can have both of these views together. But yeah, I think there are some teachings, I believe, I know there are some teachings that are explicitly dedicated to the practice of allowing people to see devas in some Buddhist traditions. There is a Tibetan practice called Terrestrial, which means leaping over, and it's meant to be like a shortcut. And it's but all meditation techniques advertise themselves as shortcuts, so don't take that too seriously. But in Terrestrial, you are supposed to use essentially various tricks of the light and things to prime your mind to be like flexible enough to see first it starts as the little globs of light, and then those resolve themselves into actual devas. And then you find the ones that are actually enlightened and helpful, and then you ask them things and get teachings from them. So there is a Tibetan tradition for doing that. I have never done this practice, but I've heard of it. It's supposed to be super duper secret, but I've heard enough hints of it in places here, there, and elsewhere that I kind of figured out what it's supposed to be. But yeah, it essentially follows the same pattern. First, by practicing meditation, you see them in forms of globs or chains of light, and then they resolve themselves in forms of the devas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So if you're ever curious about it, that thing is super duper secret and really hard to do. Like usually Tibetan teachers don't like to teach that one. You have to go through many years of other practices before they're like, okay, yeah, I think you're ready. But if you were ever curious and really wanted to see a deva, apparently there is a way.
Thank you.
There are other times that, for example, one of my teachers is the monk who wrote this book, and he has mentioned that in some dream practices also the role of devas becomes apparent. Like when you are sleeping, sometimes you will have experiences of speaking to beings, and 9 times out of 10 it's just a dream, it's just mind garbage. But sometimes devas will visit humans in dreams and give them helpful advice or whatnot. And it's hard to tell, and it's not like it's a really reliable thing. But apparently that is another avenue whereby devas present themselves. And I think there is maybe, I don't know if I would say that this is definitely like true, but there's something to it. I think there's a certain eeriness about dreams, where sometimes you can have dreams that give you knowledge and information you otherwise should not have had. I think there are enough cases of that make it an interesting question. I don't know if I would say that it is that's definitely clinches it, but I think it is an interesting thing to ask and examine. I believe there was actually some scientific research about this recently, about the idea of dreams essentially having an atemporal component. That's like dreams have this kind of fogginess about time, not just while you're in them, but also in the way they relate to your waking experience. Like the way that we know things happening in dreams is jumbled in the dream, but the way it connects to our waking reality. So like people can know things are about to happen in a dream, and that also applies to things that are about to happen when they're awake. Sometimes, I haven't read the papers on it, but there was something I saw about this recently, which kind of piqued my interest. It's a curious topic for sure. I think these questions are neat. You shouldn't, I guess it's unwise to like base all of your practice and effort on asking questions like, are devas real, or is rebirth literally true? Are psychic powers real? Is it literally possible? It's not really that important, but I think at the end of the day, there is some validity in being curious about these things, both from a scientific perspective and also from a Buddhist perspective, because if we try to genuinely understand our own minds, what is the mind? Where does it come from? Where does it go? What causes it? And what causes the states in it? I think we should be curious about that from all angles, from the perspective of meditation practice, but also scientific research, and every angle and an avenue of understanding, I think is valuable. So these are good questions to explore. I'll see if I can find that link to that. There was I think a BBC article on it recently. I don't know if you guys have ever had interesting dreams like that. I've definitely known people who had dreams that were sort of spooky, where they would know something was going to happen, that then came true, or something like that.
For me, I actually had a dream like that, but I guess it was just like a coincidence, and I just remembered. I was looking for this dry erase marker, and then in my dream, I saw that it was behind it was like inside a cupboard or something. And then right when I woke up, I went into the cupboard and I found the dry erase marker. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or something. Maybe I just remembered putting it there, but I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah. It could just be that your mind is working. Your mind is still working while you're asleep, and it could be you're trying to remember where you had put it. I mean, if you're the one who put the marker there, presumably you would have some memory of that, and you're just accessing that memory while you're asleep. Could be a mundane explanation like that as well. Yeah, but maybe not. I've known people who would have dreams and get information where they definitely shouldn't have been able to have it, like dreams about somebody dying, like they would know that someone was about to die, or that dreams about someone coming into their life, and then that person actually is there, like someone they'd never met before. They'll dream about meeting somebody. It's just a dream character to them at the time, but then in real life they meet them and it's actually the same person. Things like that. I've heard stories like this. So there definitely seems to be something interesting to it. I think, here we go. Yes, I actually did find it. It was, there is a short, this is the thing that keyed me into this. There was a short BBC little reel about it. And I think they cited some researchers in there. And I didn't have time to go and actually read their research, but it might be interesting to do. And yeah, they talk about how, the title of this is obviously very, I think, sensationalistic, but they're talking about the ability for you to kind of know things uncannily through dreams. So some of these kinds of dreams are traditionally explained as being information given to you by devas. Sometimes, they might say, hey, watch out for this thing, like a Nagara Devata going, hey, your town's in danger, you should probably, avalanche come and probably move the people or something, that kind of deal is one kind of traditional understanding for that. Could be something else, but it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of interesting. Any other questions about things that are going on? It's almost see, what's it called? Oh, yeah, Songkran. Songkran, which is anybody know about that holiday? It's not really a Buddhist holiday, but it's yeah, Songkran is the Thai pronunciation. Thais have a very hard time pronouncing Sanskrit and Pali words. So Songkran is their pronunciation of Sankranti, which is like an astrological holiday, and it's about the same time as Easter. So it's technically a secular holiday, but it's celebrated very widely in Thailand, where almost everybody is Buddhist. So it gets glued into Buddhism there. Yeah, so that's kind of, it's like their New Year festival. So unfortunately, there probably won't be anything. Normally, I think they do things like they have water fights. That's actually like the traditional celebration, which I think is really cool. But unfortunately, because of the the pandemic, there probably won't be too many outdoor public water fights this year, which is a bummer because I was looking forward to it. Is there a Sri Lankan holiday around the same time? It's kind of astronomically significant, so I would imagine there would be something.
Well, in April, there's Sri Lankan New Year.
Okay, all right. And what's traditionally done then?
Well, usually there's like
Fireworks.
yeah, a lot of
different
fireworks, and then there's like a bunch of games. Like
things.
there's like
festival games.
yeah, festival games. It's like you have to like, one of them is like climb a tree or something like that, and then take a pillow and do pillow fights, and then whoever falls down loses. There's also like tie your hands behind your back and eat bunnies or like bread, yeah. And then there's a lot more.
It's kind of like a carnival, but once a year.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's pretty fun. Yeah, it's kind of, I guess, the equinox sort of around that time, right? So it's a time of renewal. We're going into summer. That makes sense. It's the sort of birth of spring. That's pretty fun. I've not had a chance to experience that. I've never been to Sri Lanka. Been to Thailand briefly, but not Sri Lanka. So maybe someday I'll have a chance to go there and see it in situ myself. That would be lots of fun.
Yeah.
And there aren't too many, like, I think it's an interesting thing about Buddhism is that the traditional holidays there are secular holidays and Buddhist holidays that are not always going together. So there's, these like say New Year's holidays aren't really Buddhist, which is kind of unfortunate because I think a lot of the other religions have way more fun holidays. Like I think Easter and Christmas are a lot of fun. But oh well, we got what we got. Do you guys celebrate Christmas at home? Probably, right?
Well, we don't really do gifts and stuff like that, but we still put up a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Decorate the house.
Just for like the fun.
Okay.
But we don't celebrate Easter.
Okay. So, what's interesting though? My partner, her family, they're Catholic. They barely celebrate Easter either. That's the most important holiday on their calendar. They barely do anything. They have lunch, or they'll like get together, have lunch, and that's it. They don't even do the Easter egg hunt, and like I don't think I've heard of them going to church on Easter for years. It's so I don't know. They don't even take it that seriously. But my understanding is that's the most important holiday.
Yeah.
But I guess they don't take it that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. My family did all of the above when I was growing up. It was always whatever we could get, we would celebrate it. So we do Christmas, we do Easter, we do Vesak, we do Katina, we do all of it. How are your families doing? My friends, some of them, their parents have started to get their vaccinations. So it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for some people. How are your families doing? Is everybody healthy? Nobody's gotten sick?
Yeah. All of our grandparents have gotten vaccinations, not the second dose, but the first dose so far.
What's the wait time? Are they here in Ontario?
No, they're in Sri Lanka.
Oh, okay. All right. What's the estimated time between doses for there?
I think 2 or 3 months.
Okay. That's still a little shorter than we have. I think it's 4 months right now between doses here, which is, I don't know if that's safe. I think it was not, I would think it was advised by the company itself made the doses and not to wait that long, but Health Canada said, oh, we're going to do it anyway. So I don't know. I don't know who to believe.
I think everyone in Canada should be able to get at least one dose of vaccine, maybe before the end of the year, hopefully.
I think so. Our own vaccination program has been very, very slow, but the United States is nearly done, and I expect they probably would help us when they're finished.
Yeah, because then all their extra vaccines can come to us.
Yeah, exactly. And that will benefit them. Having us all vaccinated, we can open the border again. It'll make trade and travel between the two countries much easier. So I expect that will speed it up a little bit. So I think as well that probably most people will be offered a dose, both doses by the end of the year. Probably. It's slow right now, so the Prime Minister said September, but I don't think he'll hit that target. But maybe if the US comes to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about I don't think my parents have gotten theirs yet, but I think they're fine. They're generally pretty healthy. So, and they just work at home, so I'm not really concerned. Do you have any summer plans? Since you're going to be, I mean, lockdowns will still exist, but are you going to do anything? Do you do camping? Do you go outdoors?
We don't really have a summer plan this year.
Yeah.
Usually every 2 years, maybe, we go to Sri Lanka, but I don't think we'll be able to go this year.
Oh, that's probably too much to ask.
Yeah.
How long does it take normally to fly there? It'd be like a 24-hour trip, right?
2 days.
Yeah.
No, it's 2 days.
Usually it's either one day with a long flight or 2 days with 2 short flights.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty nasty. I can see why you don't go every year.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we're supposed to go this year because of the
Or we were
pandemic.
supposed to go last year, but we didn't get to
yeah.
cancel.
Of course, yeah. Whereabouts is I assume you like go back to visit your family, and
Yeah.
where in Sri Lanka is your hometown?
Minuangoda and Maranagahamula.
Yeah.
All right, I want to look these up. Could you spell them for me, or like put them in the chat?
Okay.
Like I said, I've never been there. The closest I've been is like physically is like probably Thailand, Malaysia, and I've been to India, but in like northwest India, so it's pretty far. Never had a chance to pop down. Do you also go back and visit family or anything, Naomi?
Yeah, I was also supposed to go last year. They had to cancel our ticket, our like flights because of Corona, obviously. But yeah.
Right. Okay. That's unfortunate. Okay. Okay. So it's like just north of Colombo.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I see. Whoa. My maps thing has gotten very confused, but all right. I see where it is. Okay.
Mike, I also have a question.
Yeah.
So, let's say you were forced to do one of the one of the 5 precepts, like to break one. Let's say somebody forced you to kill somebody, or somebody forced you to drink alcohol. Then what would happen? Would the person that forced you get the bad karma, or would it be the person that did the thing?
probably a bit of both, but it sort of depends. I think, like, because your intention is the key thing. So doing something against your will is obviously not as bad as being like voluntarily. So it's probably a mix of both. But this does remind me of a very good story that was told to me by the author of our textbook about basically this exact question. So I think it's a Tibetan fable. So essentially, once upon a time, there was a successful layman. He was keeping the five precepts, and he was, I think, a farmer or something. And he was going down the road, and suddenly a yucca appeared to him on the road and said, "I got you now. Now I'm going to make you break one of the five precepts. You can pick which one, but if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you right here." And so the layman thought about it and said, "Well, I really don't want to die." And he went through the five precepts in his mind. He said, "Well, is there any one of these that I could get away with breaking? Like, is there any one of these that doesn't really matter?" And he said, "Well, I feel like the fifth precept isn't really that important, about drinking alcohol or intoxicants. Like, no, it doesn't hurt anybody if I do this. So, okay," he says to the yucca, "all right, fine. I will take number five. I'll take behind door number five. I'll break that precept, and then you can let me go." So the yucca, laughs his evil laugh and gives him some alcoholic drink. And the layman takes a drink of it and walks away. The yucca disappears and says, "Fine, okay, go on your way." And the layman's walking home, and there's a tavern on the way back. And he looks at the tavern and says, "Well, I mean, I already broke it, so I'll just go inside, have another drink. It's okay. I mean, it's not any worse than what I've already done." So he goes inside and has a drink, has a couple of drinks, and he leaves. And he goes back home, and then he goes back into his house, and he's looking around for something to eat, and there's nothing because his wife has gone out to the market, and because to go shopping, they didn't have any food. So he's looking around, and then he sees his neighbor's chickens running around the yard, and he goes, "Those look pretty good. All right." So he sneaks on over, grabs one of the chickens, and brings it back and kills it, starts plucking it. And at the same time, just as he's preparing this chicken for dinner, he hears a knock at the door. He goes to the door, and it's his neighbor's young and beautiful wife. And she says to him, "Have you seen, I think one of our chickens is missing. Have you seen it around?" And he says, No, I haven't seen anything, but I'm cooking something tasty if you want to come in." And then by the end of the day, he had broken all five of the precepts. So I guess the moral of the story is that even if you think the precept is small, it's, the precepts are all built to support each other. In that case, of course, because all of those actions were intentional on his part, they were all bad karma. But yeah, I think it's also just a kind of a funny story how it's cascading consequences, because alcohol reduces our ability to make sensible judgments. But yeah, if someone like the yucca comes along and forces you to do an evil deed, they share in the negative consequences of that act. Like, they are also participants in that action. In legalistic terms, we call it like aiding and abetting. If you help someone commit a crime, then you're also guilty to a certain extent as well, and you can be punished. And that's, I think, a universally understood principle among human societies. So yeah, the answer is probably a bit of both. If you are, I think, upholding the precepts to the absolutely highest standard, there's nothing that someone can do to force you to commit an evil deed. The worst they can do is beat you, imprison you, or kill you. But if you truly value these principles and understand the long-term consequences of them, the power of keeping those principles under duress is incredible in terms of generating merit. So I think ultimately the truly wise will stick to their guns no matter what. But in more practical terms, always try and negotiate and find a way to come to a satisfying conclusion for all parties. That's the ideal resolution. but in the end, as I believe Bhavani, you've brought up before, the Buddha taught that even if you were angry for a moment, when people are, say, killing you horribly, then you're not upholding the teaching, not to its highest conclusion anyway. So I think those are the different levels that we can understand it. You know, it's probably a certain amount of bad. It's a bad deed to a certain extent if you do an evil thing under duress, but not as bad as if you do it of your own free will. If you can avoid these evil actions, then you should, by negotiating, by finding an outcome that's acceptable to everyone, or at least tolerable. And the highest ideal, if none of this is possible, sticking to your guns and doubling down on your principles is beneficial for yourself and sentient beings in the long run.
Yeah, I also remember listening to a Banach, and in it was like, I'm not sure if it's true, but I remember that there was a king, and it was like on Visak Poya Day, and so like nobody ate meat because I don't remember, but nobody was eating meat because they didn't want to kill any animals or harm, and then the king, he took a drink, and then the king wanted meat because like when you drink you want meat. I don't know, that's what the monk said in the Bana. And then so the king could see his child, and so he cut up his child and ate his child. And then after the next morning, again he like found out that he cut up and ate his child, and then that's all I remember. The rest I don't, but yeah, it leads to bad causes.
Yes, yeah. That's certainly a more dramatic leap in that version, in that story, than the one about the.
That was actually Bodhisattva.
That's a Jataka story?
Yeah. Because he asked the chef to give me meat, and then he just threw the baby. Pretty scary, huh? The Bodhisattva did that, but was unconscious.
Yeah. So that kind of thing, when you have intoxicants, it's not specifically alcohol, really. It's anything that impairs your judgment. That's the main.
Mike, I want to add something to that thing.
Yeah.
Ovini, when the Jataka stories are not always sometimes aligning with early Buddhist texts. Now, one thing is Vesantara Jataka story, where the king gives his wife and 2 children to a Brahmin, for his generosity, and also the royal elephant. People are questioning, how come the king gives the royal elephant, which is a part of people's public money, So they are aligning with the principles in the early Buddhist text. So sometimes we have to think they are mostly, I can't say they are not Buddhists, but there are some story elements that we have to align with the early texts. You can't take all that in the same way.
I think we've discussed this. We brought this up before, especially with regard to the. There's 1 or 2 Jataka stories, I believe, Ovini, you mentioned, where the Bodhisattva will do something that seems somewhat morally questionable. Either maybe it's just slightly off, or it seems not quite in line with Buddhist principles. And I think an important thing to remember is that the Jataka stories they come from a variety of sources, and sometimes Buddhist principles have been glued into folk tales, or like the origins of them are not always clear. And so it's good to view them with a little bit of skepticism, or to view them with a slightly critical eye.
At the same time, I think whoever who narrated or whatever, they wanted to emphasize more about the virtue rather than what will be seen as the moral elements. At the end, generosity is the best. Doesn't matter who is going to be sacrificed on that. Yeah. Anyway,
so sometimes it can lead to interesting conclusions. But sometimes there's still good stories that can be valuable, and we just have to be somewhat just be on our guard a little bit when we read them. As when we read anything, we have to be have our critical faculties intact and understand what we're reading, and never just take anything at face value.
Thank you.
Mike, are you done?
Yeah, I think we're done. We had a pretty good discussion about various things, and if you would help us to wrap up, Bhante, much appreciated.
I will. But before that, let me make sure the dates. So April 11th is the next date, right? And April 25th, May 9, May 23rd, June 6th is the discussion. June 20th is the exam. Is that so?
That looks right to me. Yep. Yeah, we're
Okay.
coming up on the end of it. Yeah. April 11th is correct. Yeah.
Okay, a few more days to go.
Mhm.
So hopefully those who couldn't come, they could watch our videos, and then, you know, and you said that you expecting the assignments presentations by the end of April, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was April. It was the 25th of April. Yes.
Okay, 25th April. Okay, so let's wrap this up. And once again, Ovini's voice is coming back for the Chandima. Okay, yeah, please rise, and then let's.
Yo vade tam pavero manu Jesu sakye muni bag vakate kitjo paragato balaviriya samangi tan suge tan sar natmu pemi राग विराग माने जमा सोकं धम्म मा संकट मप्पाटि कोलम मधुरमीमं पागुणं सुविपत्तं धम्ममीमं सार नन्तमुपेमि यत्ते च दिन्नमहपाल माहु छतोसु जेसु पुरिसयोगेषु हन्ते च पुङ्गलदम् दासाते सङ्गमीमं सार नन्तमुपेमि.
Thank you. That's a good way of reciting that. Thank you, Ovini.
No problem.
Yeah, great job. Yeah, I think everything is right.
Yep. I think everything's
Then,
good.
April 11th.
Yeah. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Right. Thank you, Hamdi.
Budong Kisara.